Hello and welcome back to the White Pube podcast. I am ZM and it's Sunday 13th of April 2025. If you don't know, the White Pube is a website run by myself and my friend Gabrielle de la Puente. We take turns to write about art, exhibitions and culture at large, whatever takes our fancy on any given Sunday. And we put the text version of those texts on the website, which is thewhitepube.com or .co.uk. And this audio podcast feed is where we put the audio versions of those texts so you can listen to us, the writers, read our own words in our own voices, if that is the format or medium you prefer. Stay tuned until the end and I will give you the emoji to comment on this week's Instagram post. And I will give you a little spiel about the text before I start reading it. But this text was loosely based on a day of crits that I snooped in on down at Terps Painting School, the art school down in South London. It was really interesting to me for two reasons. The first was because the format itself was a bit different to the way that crits go in art schools. Normally, my experience of them, it's normally that, you follow as a group, you go around from studio to studio following the work. It just stays where it is, in situ, in progress, and, you talk about it on the fly. This crit at Terps was a bit different. It was a bit more of an event, a bit more ceremonial. They made it a bit more of a thing of it because it just took place in one room, as I described in the text. And that was interesting, more theatrical, more interesting for me. But it was also interesting for a second reason, which was obviously as painters, as a group of painters, they've got a really interesting way of talking about paintings. That the specific language they used was, interesting to me. It wasn't pretentious. They weren't taking on affectations. They weren't, approaching it as theory or high concept or this bizarre abstract thing. All of these conversations were very nuts and bolts and grounded in the actual thing that they were talking about. And they were talking about it like it was a normal thing, like it was something that existed within the human realm and not this bizarre, abstract, academic, pretentious realm. So this text is an exercise, I think, for me in trying on that language for size, to attempt to try and approach it myself, because it felt particular, specific, but also kind of aspirational. I wanted to figure out this way of talking about painting because, I don't know, it felt different to the way that, critics even talk about paintings. So I don't know how well this will read as a text. It's more of an exercise for me, but I'm publishing it all the same. But yeah, okay. I'll get to reading the text now. The chairs were the only things in the room, about 30 of them, all lined up and facing the back wall. The window and doors behind, the wall in front, chairs facing, waiting. But the room wasn't sterile. The floor was a bunch of chipboard planks, paint splattered, corners coming loose. The back wall was pockmarked with drill holes, constellations, freckles, an image of their own. The emptiness felt temporary. This was a room of constant activity. It had been cleared. It was breathing. The room was quiet for a moment, only silence and sunlight, white walls and drill marks shifting onto the clouds. Waiting for an audience, for something, waiting for the show to start. And then bodies, motion. 3 people walked in, each holding a square wooden board. One had a drill in the other hand, one had a toolbox. They set about their work. One measuring a level line with a spirit measure and a pencil, one drilling along the line, one rummaging around in a box for fresh screws, not bent, not thread-worn, not caked in plasterboard. They stood back, surveying their work, eyeballing the level. It was satisfactory. The boards had a strip of wood attached to the back. They took the boards, flipping them, lifting them, stripped the wall and slotting them into place. Perfectly level, perfectly spaced. 3 paintings hung on the wall. 3 people stood back to survey them. As they stood, more people filled the room, crowding around the paintings. Some stood back to look at all 3 images in the same glance. Some gathered close, taking in the detail. They murmured amongst themselves. Some silent, some pointing, some whispering, some shrugging and considering the nodding. They looked for a few minutes, then turned to the chairs in front of the paintings. They went to their seats. A man stepped out in front of this audience, one hand on a vape, one hand in his pocket. He faced the audience, directed his questions to someone in the front row. Okay, so what's the status? Are these fully cooked? Are they still in the oven? Are they al dente, raw? Where are we at? A voice answered. Medium rare. The seated audience mumbled a laugh, huffed out through their noses, audible smirks. The man at the front nodded. And titles? The voice at the front answered again. From left to right, the temptation at the temple, temptation of Christ on the mountain, the transfiguration. Nods rippled across the audience. Some had their heads down, taking notes. Some looked across the 3 paintings, considering them afresh. The man at the front clapped his hands. Great, okay, we can get started. You know how this goes. We all do the talking. He gestured between the seated audience and the figure at the front. We might ask you questions. You'll also have some time to chip in just before the end if you want to. For the rest of us, he gestured out to the audience and they looked at him in response. Shall we start with what we can literally see in front of us? Imagine you're on the phone. Describe these to someone down the other end. A brief pause. Palpable intake of breath. Then, from the back. 3 paintings with the same figure across them all. The one in a red robe with a blue cloak. They're dressed the same, so I don't know. Are they the same? A voice answered nearby. Yeah, I reckon so. There's also the same black winged figure in the left one and the middle one. They're interacting, so it could be on montage, action, events. Another voice across the room. Architectural. The man at the front nodded, looking back at the paintings. Yeah, okay. He turned back to the audience. Say more. There are pink flat buildings in 2 of them. In that one on the left, the building is large and affronting. The wall faces us and then angles away. The building is detailed with lots of little bits, ornamental bits. In that one in the middle, the buildings are like a miniature city. They're out of proportion with the figures. The figures tower over the city. The man at the front gestured at the buildings as the voice narrated, pointing out the large building and the miniature city. Any thoughts on how the buildings are painted? Yeah, I guess they're pretty crisp, sharp lines, smooth planes. Then another voice from the middle. There are mountains in that middle one too, and in the one on the right. The man at the front pointed out the mountains. Do we think they're the same mountains? The same voice in the middle. They might be, but I don't think so. The middle one, the red-robed figure, is stood on a grey mountain with brown mountains in the background beyond the pink city. They all look steep and perilous. The right one, the mountain is brown, but it looks flat and jagged and like a different kind of brown. It's more orange. The man at the front nodded. So, middle is cooler, right is warmer. Yeah, I reckon so. Right, okay, good. We think they're different landscapes. The man at the front paused, then stalked over to the side and pointed across at each painting with his vape, left to right. So, we have one painting where the red-robed figure stands at a balcony with the black-winged figure. A top and a fronting pink building, lots of little details, ornamental bits. 2 painting. The red-robed figure stands on a grey mountain, towering over a miniature pink city. Red Robes is pointing at the black-winged figure as Black Wings walks away out of the frame. 3 painting. Red Robes is in the middle, on brown warm mountain with flat jagged rocks. A crowd of other robed figures gather around. The ones at the bottom are crouching. They're all looking up at Red Robes. He paused, scanning back over the paintings. Anything else? Any other bits our caller on the other end of the line might appreciate knowing? The sky is gold. Yeah, huge gold sky in all of them. Even the one on the left, slithers of gold sky around the building. In the one on the left, there's a doorway and we can see into the pink building. The interior is striped. There are columns, but it is empty and enigmatic. The man at the front turned back to point, nodding. Yeah, we can see a slice into the building, little doorway. Great. Last thoughts on description. There are no shadows. Everyone paused, peering back in. You're right. At the front, someone got up to look closer. The man at the front turned back to the seated audience. What does that do to the painting? The person looking closer stood back, shrugged. It makes it look and feel like it is a dream, like unreal. Say more. I mean, yeah, okay. I guess these paintings have a bit of surrealism going on. They're a bit off kilter, a bit jarring. It's the lack of shadows, sure. Didn't Dali do that with his paintings? They're shadowless, I think. But it's also the way all the figures, across all of them, they don't really touch the ground. They're just laid across the board into the space. None of these figures feel real. None of the spaces feel real, or they don't make sense in the way real things make sense. Gold sky, miniature cities, and I mean, is that black-winged figure the devil? A demon? His face is scratched out in that one on the left. I can't really tell. The room was silent for a while as everyone considered what had been said. Then a voice from the side. I mean, I feel like there's an aura to these paintings, or like a vibe. The surrealism makes sense to me. The man at the front took a hit on his vape, head bouncing as he weighed up the words. I invite you to expand on that point. Like, the gold and the stiffness of the figures, the way the faces and bodies are painted, they feel kind of Byzantine, like a mix between that Eastern Orthodox icon way of painting and like Renaissance kind of style. It's jarring because these paintings are all square. I mean, I could say more about that, but that's not the point. The bodies floating, laid across the space, they're arranged in a way that feels old or different. Like, you take a photo, like a candid, and it's a frozen frame of a body falling through a natural rhythm. It's got movement. These are different. They're posing. They have an aura, an authority, or a dignity to them. I think saying they're stiff is inaccurate. I think these feel like divine bodies. They are floating because they are holy and special. That one in the middle especially, it's really apparent to me that these aren't humans. They're towering over a city. There's a paranormal feeling to it all, like myth, allegory, legend. So you don't mind the weirdness or the off-kilterness? No, I mean, not at all. I think it's really compelling. I feel satisfied just by looking at that weirdness. The weirdness makes it all make sense. It's such a weird thing, a weird image, in a good way. I don't think it's meant to be read logically. There's something else going on, so I guess that weirdness feels like a kind of divinity to me. Like, I think this is meant to inspire some kind of reverence. The man at the front nodded. Do you want to say more about that? Where you think that sits, where it might come from? No, I think that's all. More silence as the man at the front scans the seated audience. Any more responses or thoughts about the spatial weirdness? Someone put their hand up at the front. I think it's also how smooth all the scenes are. Like, across all three paintings, the paint has been laid down so flat it's almost cracking. It's opaque, like it's not thin, it's just laid on so smooth. It almost looks airbrushed. Maybe that's part of why it feels weird as well. Like a hazy, smooth, shadowless dream. Maybe there's a kind of doll-like uncanniness to the floating figures. The man nodded sagely. Uncanny is a good word for it, I think. A voice from the middle. I keep thinking about that building in the one on the left that someone said was affronting. They looked around, trying to spot the person who had spoken before. That's also a really good description, I think, because, sorry, not to go back on ourselves here, but I feel like the architecturalness is the bit I keep looking at. The buildings feel as important as the figures, and that tower in the painting on the left. The man at the front stalks back over to point at it with his vape. It's got a real presence. It is this, like, total, fully encompassing plane. Everything else in that one just bends around that front flat plane bit. I think, like, My thing is, I think has been measured so meticulously, it kind of supersedes real life. Paranormal is a good word, kind of the way it supersedes goes beyond the normal. Like it's been measured in a way that feels really careful and tight. Real buildings don't get that crisp and clean. Our perspective is never dead on, is it? And that building is so aligned, so central. It's like those photographs you take with those massive telescopic lenses. They are in higher definition than like the human eye. This feels like that. Perfect clarity, above and beyond human clarity. There's no fuzz, only hard line. Like, oh, that's probably the uncanniness, isn't it? Sorry, a hand shot up from the front row. I'm sorry to interrupt, but can I just say, I am not sure what uncanny really means, but I think I'd also like to mention that the buildings are pink, but like a sickly pink. They look like strawberry yoghurt. They look washed out. They look unwell, especially against the gold in the background. The one on the left, the pink tower, is so large and in charge, if you know what I mean. It is an overwhelming kind of yogurtiness. And the one in the middle is so cool, especially against the gold. It looks like how snot feels. Even though it's not the colour of snot, I just associate that colour with snot, or the consistency of snot. The man at the front raised his eyebrows in surprise, then turned back to the paintings once more. He scrutinised them closely for a moment, then nodded. Snot and the medicinal. Yeah, I guess. Everyone nodded. The man at the front gestured back at the paintings. We haven't spoken much about the painting on the right. Where is that? Silence from the audience. Audible blinking. If you don't know, I might hazard a guess. He turned to face the paintings, hands behind his back, clasping the vape. I think the painting has an inner emptiness, a kind of compositional completeness. But it's the kind of completeness that makes the painting feel kind of waterproof. The figures are gathered round that figure in the red robes. He is in the middle at the top. His robes are lined with gold in this painting, so he feels very central, focal. 2 more figures at the top, to his right and left, and then 3 figures crouching at the bottom. They're all actually looking at the figure in the red robes, aren't they? Centre, focus. My eye looks along the top, along the bottom. The middle is empty. It's all legs and feet, empty rock. My eye circles around the true middle, the actual geographical centre of the painting, literally in a big circle. It is more spatial weirdness, like we said earlier. It feels waterproof because the circle locks you into an arranged movement where you're constantly circling, never penetrating the centre. He turned back to the crowd. Now, I don't give a fuck about classical composition as a rigid set of rules. Do what you like. There's no right or wrong way to do painting. But it's interesting to think about the way this departs from what we expect from a painting's layout. The audience nodded. Someone at the front put their hand up again. Speaking of composition, I think that one on the left has a similar-ish thing where the building is there, big, empty. The figures are at the top. I look up at them at the top. I look at the side where the door is. I only just notice the rest of the building. I don't really look at it directly. And when I make my eyes go out of focus, they squinted at the painting. It disappears entirely. I only notice the dark doorway, the dark figures. The man at the front shifted his gaze back over to the painting on the left, and nodded, squinting. An alarm chimed from the crowd, and someone raised their hand. That's the timer, by the way. The man at the front gave a thumbs up and turned to the person at the front who had been silent since the beginning. This is your chance to chip in, if there's anything you'd like to add. The person at the front shook their head. No, I guess I can first say thank you to everyone for their consideration and feedback. It's been really valuable. I'm already thinking about the paintings I'm making next, and I'm glad the emptiness and spatial trickery made it in, because I've really been playing around with composition on these. They are montage, there's action, so it's not linear. It's just not linear. Like, these aren't in order. There's panels missing between them. So I wasn't sure they'd get read accurately, but I'm happy with what's come across. The man at the front smiled and nodded, turning back to the paintings for a last glance. Okay, Next one is at past. Do you think we can do a 5-minute turnaround? The person who had brought in the drill shrugged and then nodded. Unsure but optimistic. Probably. Great. Fake break. See you back in 5 at past. The seated audience got up, stretching their legs and murmuring amongst each other. They filed out of the room. 2 people approached the paintings, lifting them off the wall. They walked out of the room behind the crowd. The man with the vape remained and looked at the empty wall, considering the image of the drill hole constellations. God, this room is really falling apart. Someone walked back into the room, carrying a huge canvas, as tall as it was wide. They hoisted it up with their arms spread wide. Yeah, the walls are just like drilling into chalk at this point, but it's fine. I can prop this up on the floor. The man who had remained at the front took a toke on his vape and shook his head. No, don't worry, unless you'd prefer. I can just slot a screw into a hole up there. If it's just this one? The person holding the enormous canvas nodded. Just this one. The man at the front nodded also, slotting 3 screws into a series of level holes at the top. Reckon that's high enough? Yeah, okay. It'd be funny to do one of these crits in like a lecture theatre, with no lecture, just the painting propped up in the middle of an empty stage. I mean, it already feels a bit like that already. Oh yeah, I imagine the nerves feel the same. You'll be fine though. It'll be useful. Together, they lifted the canvas onto the screws, hanging it carefully. They stepped back to survey their work, tilting their heads. It looked relatively straight, but the man who had been at the front got the spirit level and double-checked. They stood in front of the painting until the crowd filed back into the room. past already. They took their seats, ready to start again. And that is the text. Thank you for listening. Yeah, I think beyond the context I gave you at the beginning, the 3 paintings are also, predictably for me, but maybe randomly in the context, but they are 3 panels from the Maesta by Duccio, a painter from 13th century Siena. I went to go see the Sienese painting show that's on at the moment at the National Gallery, and I don't know, these paintings are also like, one of them is like my favourite painting. I've been waiting to see it for literally all my life, but it's been in New York, and when I went to New York in November, it was on loan somewhere else. Like, it was meant to be at the Frick, but the Frick was closed for refurbishment, and I guess this was going to be in a show that was opening later on in the year at the Met, that was then travelling over to London. So I just missed it when I was in New York, and I didn't realise it was coming over to London. So I was like really disappointed to not see it. But then to finally see it here in London in April, many months later, felt, yeah, really beautiful and nice. And I wanted to write something that felt like a love letter, or not a love letter. I wanted to write something that felt like a really close analysis for this painting that I loved so much, without killing it, kind of. I wanted to think about the spatial trickery amongst that panel and all the other 3 panels that were there. I also wanted to transparently make that visit tax deductible by writing about it. So now I can claim this as a tax deductible expense. But yeah, this text is an exercise, I guess, in bridging that gap between the way painters talk about paintings and the way critics talk about paintings. Doing this exercise, trying this language on for size, it became really apparent that there is something missing from the way that critics write about paintings. There is something that only really is captured in that moment when painters are talking about a painting in a crit, you know? And there's some of that information, or like that energy gets lost when it's like written up in a piece of criticism. Something's missing there. So yeah, attempting to bridge the gap. There you go. Please, can I have as my emoji, can I have like the little angel emoji? You know, the angel that's just like head and wings and halo. Can I have that guy? And that's all. I will see you, not next Sunday, but the Sunday after. Gabrielle will see you next Sunday. And I'll leave you to the rest of this Sunday. Have a nice time. Love you, bye.